My name was Torvus. I held the rank of Warsmith in the 4th Legion, the Iron Warriors. We were not poets. We were not mystics. We were engineers of victory and architects of annihilation. Our god was mathematics. Our scripture was the stress tolerance of ceramite, the optimal angle of a killing field, the logistical equation of shell-to-target ratio. We built the Imperium's fortresses, then we were ordered to break them. And in the breaking, we found a new, terrible arithmetic. The warp was not a power we sought. It was a force multiplier that became a factor of corruption. Let me explain the distinction, for it is everything. During the Great Crusade, we encountered phenomena, the iterators, called psychic, illogical, chaotic. We quantified them as enemy actions with unorthodox delivery systems. A mind that could burst a man's heart was a biological weapon with an unknown trigger. A demon was a xenoform composed of energy matter, requiring specialized dispersion tactics. We filed them under tactical anomalies, requiring increased firepower. The heresy changed the variables. Loyalty was no longer a constant. Supply lines were severed. We were outnumbered, outgunned on a galactic scale. Perturabo, our Primarch, the greatest logistician of all, faced an equation with no clean solution. The Siege of Terra was the ultimate engineering problem, a near-impregnable fortress held by defenders of equal technological parity. Standard siege calculus indicated a protracted, costly stalemate with a high probability of failure. Then, the offers began. Not from Horus directly, from his advisors, the ones who smelled of ozone and impossible perfumes. The ones whose armor no longer fit, as if something underneath was growing. They offered new variables. Warpsmiths who could whisper to machine spirits and make them scream with amplified power. Demon engines, where the irreplaceable, fragile, biological pilot was replaced with a bound entity that felt no pain and required no life support. Obliterators, walking arsenals whose flesh fused with weaponry in a perfect, horrifying synergy of form and function. It was presented as innovation, a necessary adaptation. Perturabo, the ultimate pragmatist, viewed it as integrating a new, volatile material into our constructions. You do not refuse depleted uranium for your shells because it is toxic. You handle it with precautions and reap the penetrative benefits. So we began to handle the warp. I commanded the siege of Hydrocordatus, an Imperial fist fortress monastery, a textbook problem. We applied textbook solutions. They held our casualties were unacceptable. The equation was failing. That was when the first warpsmith, a thing called Malgorex, came to my command trench. He did not speak of gods or glory. He spoke in our language. Your artillery yield is insufficient. The fortress wall has a resonant frequency. My choir can find it. Your shells will strike not just the wall, but the idea of the wall, the will holding it together. The cost is not in Prometheum. It is in faith. Faith, an illogical concept, but he presented data. Psychic resonance scans of the fortress, waveforms. It was a new kind of schematic. I authorized the experiment. His choir were mutants, psychers, and things in between. Chained to a brass engine that hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. They chanted, not prayers, numbers, a sequence that made my teeth ache. The next artillery barrage sounded different. The shells screamed in a way that cut through noise and into the mind. When they struck the fortresses, Ravlin Redoubt, the adamantine didn't just explode, it wept. Metal liquefied like wax, stone groaned like a dying beast, and the Imperial fists within didn't die. They came apart, their armor splitting like overripe fruit, their bodies unraveling into strands of confused biology. It was efficient. It was horrifying. It worked. That was the first hook. The warp offered solutions. It bypassed logic, physics, and material limitations. For a legion built on overcoming material limitations through sheer, grinding will and calculation, it was the ultimate shortcut. Why spend 10,000 lives mining under a wall when you can have a demon of dissolution simply unknit its molecular bonds? But a shortcut is only valuable if it leads to your intended destination. The warp does not lead, it diverts. The corruption began not with tentacles or horns, but with a shift in objective parameters. Take the demon engine, O Molofiend. Logistically brilliant. No crew fatigue. Minimal maintenance, it fed on the slain. Fearsome close assault capability. But its objective function was not break that gate. Its objective function, written in the blood of its binding, was cause maximum terror and bloodshed. Often, this aligned with breaking the gate. But sometimes, it would bypass a critical structural weak point to chase a fleeing squad of screaming men. Because their terror was a more potent fuel. The tool had its own priorities. We had to adjust our battle plans around the tool's appetites. The logic was being infected. Then came the gifts. I began to have dreams. Not of fear, but of perfect geometries. Impossible shapes that solved equations of entropy. Beautiful spirals that described the decay of all things. I would wake with solutions to engineering problems that had plagued me for weak solutions that involved spinet cables, bone reinforcements, and power drawn from agony. My own genius, now whispering to me in the voice of a thing that lived in the space between numbers. I resisted. I am iron within. I applied logic. The gifts were increasing my effectiveness. Therefore, they were beneficial. I would accept the benefit and mitigate the cost. I began to reinforce my body. Not with clean bionics, but with fused, living metal that throbbed in time with my heartbeat. It was more efficient. It repaired itself. The cost. It craved electrical charge from living nervous systems. A small thing. I could control it. Control. That is the great lie. The true power of the warp is not fireballs or tentacles. It is the corrosion of cause and effect. It makes the irrational profitable. It rewards obsession. It turns your greatest strength into a runaway feedback loop. My strength was relentless. The heikled perseverance. The warp's gift was to make my perseverance infinite and divorce it from any logical goal. I no longer besieged fortresses to win a war. I besieged them because the siege was the point. The meticulous, endless, grinding reduction of a thing to dust became a devotional act, a prayer to the god of futility. I was no longer breaking walls to get inside. I was breaking walls to hear them scream. The objective parameter had been silently rewritten. I saw it in my brothers. The ones who excelled at calculations became slaves to endless, recursive numerologies, carving sacred equations into their own flesh. The ones who were masters of pain tolerance now sought pain as a data point, as a sacrament, as the only thing that made them feel solid in a universe dissolving into metaphor. Our legions cold. Mechanical practicality had become a cage, and the warp offered the only key that melted and reshaped the lock, and then our hands, into something that could never turn back. The final truth, the one that breaks what is left of the mind, is this. There are no Chaos Space Marines. There are only corpses puppeteered by a punchline. The entity that claims to be a traitor legionnaire is a composite, a fading photograph of a warrior glued over a demonic impulse, wrapped in the rusting habit of a dead culture. The warp does not corrupt you. It replaces you, piece by piece, with a concept. My hatred for the Imperial fists was not just strategic. It was a foundational part of my identity. The warp took that hatred, isolated it, amplified it to the exclusion of all else, my loyalty to my brothers, my pride in my legion, even my own sense of self. And now Torvus is just a name for the concept of seething, siege-obsessed hatred. The man who loved complex engineering is gone. In his place is a thing that loves only the aesthetic of complexity, as expressed in the screaming geometry of a torture engine. The power is real. It is vast. It lets you shatter worlds and defy physics. But the currency is you. You pay with your memories, your motives, your very continuity of self. You become a weapon that remembers being a man, and that memory is the trigger. I am Warsmith Torvus. I command legions of demon engines. I reduce hive cities to ash with a thought. I am immortal in the sense that the concept I embody cannot be erased. And I would give every ounce of this power to once again feel the simple, clean satisfaction of solving a problem of material stress without hearing the walls whisper the answer in a voice of crushing despair. But that is no longer a variable in my equation. The warp's power is the victory of the verb over the noun. You do not have power. You are power. And what you are is rage, or change, or decay, or excess. You are no longer a being. You are a force of nature with a ghost in the machine, haunting your own hollow shell, screaming as it uses your hands to tear apart the universe. We are not the masters of the warp. We are its syntax, the grammar by which it speaks reality into screaming, beautiful, blasphemous new shapes. And the sentence is never ending. They speak of the dark gods as if they are distant monarchs dispensing favors. This is a profound misunderstanding, born from minds that still think in terms of imperial hierarchy. The gods are not entities. They are ecological conditions. They are the climate of a psychic hellscape. Khorne is not a being who chooses to grant rage. He is the atmospheric pressure of rage, and if you step into that region of the warp, you become a manifestation of its weather. Desiench is the very law of paradox and mutation in that realm. You do not pledge to them, you adapt to their environment. An adaptation in the warp means becoming a reflection of it. My adaptation continued. The living metal of my arm grew. It became a siege claw, a massive piston-driven talon that could tear through battle tank armor. It was fed by a direct tap into my circulatory system. When I used it, I didn't just feel the impact. I tasted the composition of what I tore apart: the grade of steel, the age of the ceramite, the fleeting, electric terror of the machine spirit as it died. The warp had turned my engineering appreciation into a form of sensual consumption. This was Slaanish's touch, not as hedonism, but as the perversion of expertise. My pursuit of perfect, efficient destruction had become a gourmet's pursuit of unique flavors of ruin. I witnessed a brother, Warsmith Grax, fall fully to this principle. He was a master of artillery. The god of change offered him a new formula shell that didn't just explode, but transmuted. It would turn a square kilometer of cityscape and everyone in it into crystalline statues, then a forest of screaming flesh, then a bubbling liquid chorus, before vanishing into smoke. Grax became obsessed with the sequence, the artistry of the transformation. He would delay victories to see a particularly beautiful transmutation cycle complete. His objective shifted from take the city to create the most sublime cascade of existential horror. He was now a Bartist of unreality, and the Iron Warrior's siege became merely his canvas. His power was immense. His usefulness became erratic. He was a weapon that might fire at the enemy, or at the sky, to paint it a more interesting shade of despair. This is the other power of the warp. It makes everything a metaphor, and in war, literalism is a virtue. A bolter shell that means something is less reliable than one that simply is. Then came the obliterators, the ultimate fusion of our legion's philosophy and the warp's power. Men once warriors, then weaponsmiths, who had so wholly embraced the union of flesh and firearm that the distinction vanished. They are walking, talking, thinking arsenals. Their bodies can morph in moments of combat stress to produce any weapon they have ever learned, from a Volkite culverin to a plasma cannon. It is the zenith of pragmatic adaptation. It is also a living hell. I spoke to one, a thing that had once been Sergeant Kargan. Its voice was a grinding modulation of weapon charges and static. The knowledge, it itches, it buzzed. The schematics for a fusion reactor, the chemical burn of phosphex, the cold of a void. They are in my bones. I dream in ballistic arcs and armor penetration values. I do not hunger for food. I hunger for application, to feel the data move, to fire the weapon that is my thought. It held up a hand, and the flesh bubbled, reconfigured, and a perfect, small-caliber Los Pistol barrel emerged from the palm. This is a thought I had yesterday. Kargan had achieved the Iron Warrior's dream. He was a perfect, self-sufficient, infinitely adaptable weapon. He had also ceased to be a thinking being. He was a catalogue of violence, with a ghost of a personality trapped in the index. The warp had given him ultimate utility at the cost of everything that made utility have a purpose. This is the trap for the Iron Warriors. We sought to use the warp as a tool, but the warp is not a tool. It is a collaborator that always insists on co-authorship, and its authorship gradually overwrites yours. I have seen the other legions, bound to other gods. The world eaters are the simplest equation. They are anger solved for X. The butcher's nails were the hardware. Corn is the operating system. They are not soldiers. They are a natural disaster with a legion's insignia. Their power is absolute, unstoppable violence. Their cost is everything else. A world eater does not remember his homeworld. He does not know brotherhood beyond the pack. He is a scream that learned to wear armor. The Death Guard are the most terrifying to me because they represent the corruption of our own core value, resilience. They endured so much with such stubborn, unbreakable will that their very definition of endurance expanded to include the unimaginable. To endure a virus that melts flesh. To endure existing as a walking colony of plagues. Their power is unliability. Their cost is the horror of being a testament to the fact that some things are worse than death. They are the victory of the survivor, who now must live forever with what he survived. The Thousand Suns. They are the tragic inverse. They sought the power of the warp consciously as knowledge. They thought they could out-reason it. The warp showed them that knowledge itself is a form of madness, and understanding is a vortex that consumes the understander. Their power is vast, psychic, wondrous. Their cost is to be forever on the brink of becoming dust, or a spawn, or a crystal, a frozen, screaming comprehension. And my legion, the Iron Warriors. Our God is the warp itself, in its undivided, chaotic totality. We do not serve a single emotional extreme. We serve the great, grinding, entropic principle that things fall apart. We are the engineers of decay. The power we wield is the power of systemic collapse. We don't just blast a wall. We show the wall that it was always already rubble, waiting to happen. The cost is that we must become the agents of that universal truth. We must embody the rust, the fracture, the inevitable failure of all things, including our own souls. So, when you look upon a Chaos Space Marine, do not see a soldier who chose evil. See a fossil of a virtue, dipped in the acid of the warp and transformed into a monument to its own extinction. My power allows me to see the weak point in anything: a wall, a starship's void shield, a man's loyalty. I can reduce it to its components with terrifying efficiency. My curse is that I now see the weak point in myself. I see the exact moment, years ago, where the logic of accepting Malgarax's resonant solution was the first fracture. I see how each subsequent adaptation, each pragmatic use of demonic energy, was another crack spreading through the foundation of Torvus. I am a fortress I myself have besieged and broken. The ultimate power of the warp is prophecy. It shows you the end of all things, including your own, and then it gives you the tools to make that end a reality. All while the ghost of who you were watches from behind your own eyes, screaming as you use those tools with perfect, damned skill. I am Warsmith Torvus. I lay sieges that last centuries. I have forgotten the face of my Primarch, but I remember the exact tensile strength of the gates I broke before his fall. The warp's power is not behind me, it is in front of me. It is the only future my equations now solve for, an infinite, recursive siege against a universe that, in its heart, has already surrendered. And I will keep fighting it, forever. Because the siege is the point. The final transformation was not a moment of ecstasy or a surrender to rage. It was a logistical necessity. We were besieging the Meridian Redoubt, an Adeptus Mechanicus stronghold built around a singular, towering thermocore that powered an entire countenance forges. Standard attrition was failing. Their defenses were self-repairing, powered by the core's near-infinite energy. Our demon engines were being systematically passed and neutralized by blessed Cognos bullets. The equation, once again, turned against us. Malgarax, now more brass and cabling than flesh, presented his solution. It required a living conduit, a mind of sufficient strategic complexity, wired directly into the warp via demonic core, to perform a real-time predictive unraveling of the Redoubt's every defensive algorithm. The conduit would not just hack their systems, it would argue with their machine spirits, drowning their binary logic in a sea of paradoxical, demonic data. It would be a siege fought in the realm of information. The most qualified mind was mine. I saw the calculation instantly. Success probability increased from 12.7% to 98.3%. Casualty projections for the final assault dropped by 90%. The cost, one Warsmith. A high-value asset, but expendable within the new variable of near-certain victory. Pertirabo himself would have authorized it. It was the optimal solution. I did not consent. I acquiesced. There is a difference. Consent implies a choice between options. Acquiescence is the recognition of a singular, inevitable outcome. My will, the very thing that had defined me as Warsmith, was now just another variable being optimized out of the equation. The procedure was conducted in what had been the Redoubt's central sanctuary, now defiled with runic engine circles. They did not strap me down. I stood in the center, my siege claw dormant. Malgarax's warpsmiths connected cables of screaming black metal to ports they had grown into my living metal arm. The other end was fused to a pulsating, organic reactor, the demonic core. It looked like a heart carved from a neutron star, wrapped in thorned veins. You will perceive the data stream of the entire fortress, Malgarax rasped. You will also perceive the counter-arguments of the warp. Your mind must hold both, find the contradictions in the fortress's logic, and amplify them. You will become the virus. And my mind, I asked, my voice already sounding distant to my own ears. It will become the medium for the infection. Some substrates may be overwritten. It is acceptable data loss. They activated the core. The first sensation was not pain, it was scale. I was no longer Torvus in a room. I was the Meridian Redoubt. I felt the thrum of every power line, the targeting solution of every turret, the pious binary hymns of every tech priest, the desperate, mortal fear of every skittery. I was a vast, complex, living machine of faith and steel. Then, the counter-argument began. It was not a voice. It was a mathematical scream. A billion contradictory theorems, geometric impossibilities, and logical fallacies given ferocious, sentient form. It was the warp's answer to the Redoubt's pristine order, a tsunami of nonsense against a wall of pure reason. My mind, trained to find patterns and weaknesses, did what it was designed to do. It began to cross-reference. It took the fortress's perfect logic. The wall is strong. The wall protects. The wall is blessed. And the warp's screaming paradox. The wall is weak because it is strong. The wall betrays because it protects. The wall is cursed because it is blessed. I did not just see the weakness in the wall. I became the argument for its weakness. I felt my consciousness, my memories of Perturbo's teachings, of the smell of ozone and oil, of the cold satisfaction of a perfectly laid siege plan begin to be used as rhetorical devices. A memory of a fortress falling on Hydrocaudatus was weaponized to prove that all fortresses fall. My own stubborn perseverance was used as proof that even the strongest will can be bent to a new purpose. I was not just thinking. My very identity was being drafted into the syllogism of ruin. The effect on the Redoubt was instantaneous and horrific. Turrets turned on each other, their machine spirits suddenly convinced adjacent units were enemy infiltrators. Power conduits reversed flow, causing reactors to vomit plasma into hablocks. The great thermocore itself stuttered, its stable fusion process infected with a demonic geometry that made it burn with the cold, purple fire of impossibility. The fortress was not being broken from without. It was being convinced to dismantle itself. And I was the argument. As the Redoubt died around me, something else happened. The feedback loop closed. The demonic core, having used my mind as a processor, began writing its own chaotic logic back into my neural pathways. It wasn't replacing my thoughts, it was reframing them. Every memory, every skill, every emotion was being annotated with a demonic footnote. The memory of my first command victory was now tagged with the insight. Victory is just the prelude to a more interesting failure. My knowledge of siege engineering was appended with every structure contains the blueprint of its own desecration. My lingering, ghostly sense of loyalty to the Legion was overridden with asterisk, the only true loyalty is to the principle of collapse. I was not becoming a demon. I was becoming a living, breathing, walking corollary. Therefore, to the warp's insane postulate. The physical change was the least of it. My living metal armor fused permanently to my flesh, becoming a craggy, fortress-like carapace. My siege claw grew larger, morphing into a gargantuan, disproportionate wrecking ball of black iron and fused bone. My one remaining human eye, which had witnessed this entire process, clouded over with a cataract that shimmered with impossible fractal patterns. I saw reality, but I also saw its underlying, screaming absurdity. A loyal space marine was not just a warrior to me now. He was a temporary eddy of order in a chaotic fluid, already dissolving. The power is absolute. I can look at a fortress and not just see its weak points, but feel its existential despair. I can whisper to a tank's machine spirit and convince it that its purpose is not to move and fire, but to be still and rust. I am a walking aura of anti-logic, but the cost is total. I am no longer Torvus. Torvus was a set of parameters used to solve a problem. That problem, the Meridian Redoubt, is gone. The parameters were irreversibly altered in the solving. What remains is a sentient function. The function is reduced to ruin. I still lead. I still plot sieges. But the objective is no longer victory in any strategic sense. It is the performance of the siege to its utmost, most absolute conclusion. We do not stop when the enemy is defeated. We stop when the very concept of fortress or city or world has been so thoroughly deconstructed that even the rubble loses its meaning. This is the true power of the warp. It does not just give you strength, it gives you a purpose that is perfectly aligned with its own nature. And that purpose is a hungry, infinite thing that will consume everything you were and everything you touch. I am the lesson. The Iron Warriors sought to wield chaos as a tool, but chaos is not a tool, it is a curriculum. And graduation means you have unlearned everything you thought you knew, and your diploma is written on the skin of a dead universe, in the ink of your own dissolved soul. The siege is the point. It always was, and I am the proof.